flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. As I said, this is a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette. We'll call the matters in the order in which they appear on the printed agenda. You may want to have an agenda so you can follow along to see when your matter will be called. Now, if you plan to address us tonight, we ask you please come up to the podium, please speak into the microphone and tell us who you are and where you live, as that may be relevant to the matter at hand. We ask that you please speak clearly into the microphone so that we can hear you, and because everything you say and everything we say is being recorded. And from those recordings, minutes of the meeting are prepared. Those minutes are available both in hard copy form at Village Hall and also on our website. Also, our Village Board meetings are televised on Local Access Channel 6 and on the Internet. And if you look up corners of the room, you can actually see the cameras. The red light indicates the active camera. By televising our meetings, we make it easy for our neighbors in the community to follow the proceedings of the Village Board, to see the types of matters that come before us, the questions that we ask, and the policies we create. And you can find archived videos of Village Board and other local government meetings at wilmette.com. And I'd like to personally thank all the residents of Wilmette who regularly tune in to Channel 6 to follow the workings of their local government. Now, before each meeting, the board receives a packet of agenda materials, and these materials are also posted on our website on the Friday before our meeting so that residents and other interested parties can review the very same materials that the board members receive. This week's packet contained 116 pages. And we've had an opportunity to review all the information in the agenda packet, so if you do plan to address us tonight, we ask you to tell us the most relevant, most material, most important points that you'd like us to focus on. Finally, we are a community of neighbors, and as such, we want our meetings to be as civil and courteous as possible. So as a courtesy to those around you, please take this time to turn off your cell phones and other devices. I'm doing that right now. And while we're turning off our phones, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Wolf.
Here.
Trustee Sullivan.
Here.
Trustee Plunkett.
Here.
Trustee Dodd. Trustee Kurzman.
Here.
Trustee Pierce.
Here.
President Blinsky.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is item 2, public comment. During public comment, we ask if there's any member of the audience who would like to address the board on an item which is not on the agenda. Members of the audience who wish to address the board on an item which is on the agenda can do so when that matter is called. So is there any member of the audience who would like to address the board on a matter which is not on the agenda? May I see a show of hands? Okay, moving on. Next item is the consent agenda, item 3. As described on the printed agenda, items which are routine business that are not normally debated by the Village Board are placed on the consent agenda. So all items that begin with the number 3 are on the consent agenda, and so tonight that starting on page 1, beginning with item 3.1, and then all the items, almost all the items on page 2, ending with item 3.14. Items on the consent agenda are up for approval tonight, and if an item is not removed by a member of the audience and not removed by one of the trustees, the item will be approved and it will not be discussed. So let me begin by asking, is there any member of the audience who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask if there's any trustees who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda. Okay, may I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Trustee Wolf.
Aye.
Trustee Sullivan.
Aye.
Trustee Plunkett.
Aye.
Trustee Kurzman.
Aye.
Trustee Pierce.
Aye.
President Blinsky.
Aye. The motion carries. The consent agenda has been adopted. If you are here for an item on the consent agenda, it's just been approved, and I will clarify. That includes land use item 3.6 and 3.7. So if that's your item, it was just approved. There'll be no further discussion of that item or any of the other items on the consent agenda, so you're free to leave. Of course, you're more than welcome to stay. Now, it's early, so please stop by one of our restaurants before you head home, okay? Celebrate your zoning variance. Okay, next item on the agenda is item 4, report of officers, and we'll start with the report from our village manager, Mr. Frenzer.
No report, Mr. President.
Next report is from our corporation counsel, Mr. Stein.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Next item is item 5, report of the Liquor Control Commissioner, and there's no report tonight. So we'll move on to our standing committee reports. We'll begin with the Land Use Committee. Trustee Pierce.
Everything was covered on the consent agenda.
Item 6.2 is the Finance Committee. Trustee Sullivan.
We have one item this evening, and it's to provide an update on the first quarter financial performance. That's 6.21.
So Ms. Malloy, the village's finance director, will make that presentation. Welcome. It's been a while since we've seen you at a meeting.
Just a little while. And I can see the presentation in front of me,
So
but
can
I
we get
know
that on
that you're
the
not seeing it
board
in front
or
of
in
you
the,
yet.
there we go.
There we go.
People in TV land are seeing that as well, I believe.
There we go.
Yes, I'm told yes.
Okay.
Okay, so as you already know, what I'm going to talk about is first quarter results. But I'll also let you know that it really is more than just the first quarter. I'm looking into April, and in some cases, I already have some of May's information as well. And as we click to this first slide here, there's just a couple items that I'm going to cover. One is the first topic. It's really what is probably the biggest threat to the budget that we have in 2018 and going into 2019. So I'm going to give you some sense of what that is and some of the ideas that we have surrounding it. Then I'll give you a sense of where we are with the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund, and we'll talk about the remaining budget schedule that we will have in place for 2019. Sales tax. Really, as I was just saying a moment ago, this is what I see as the biggest risk to our 2018 budget. I think it's going to be a major topic that we will talk about in 2019. In prior years, we have also talked about potential actions by the state and what it might mean. I have no updates about those potential issues, and as we have a sense of those going forward, we'll talk about them some more. But really, sales tax is sort of a new item. We've sort of talked about it in the background before, but I'm sure you have read the paper and are aware of some of the changes that might be happening to some of our retail stores. So as an estimate right now, that could have about a $500,000 impact. There could be some other changes that occur that if they come to fruition, that's another $400,000 of revenue that the village would not see. So we actually just had a finance committee meeting prior to this one where we talked about those particular items and then talked about what are some of the things that we might think about doing and actions that we could take to help mitigate the impact of those. They had to, in general categories, it had to do with some expense reductions that the village might see. We could talk about some changes in budget philosophy that really was centered around how we handle the non-recurring revenues that come in. Think about the non-recurring permit and the real estate transfer tax monies that have come in the past and how we've allocated them to handle capital projects that we've had. Maybe we're going to make a decision that if we needed to, we wouldn't have those monies flow into those particular what I'll call funds. We would leave it in the general fund as a way to backfill for a loss in sales tax revenue. And then there's potential revenue enhancement ideas that we've talked about before in the past that we might consider exploring further and actually moving on those if we needed to. Those were some of the ideas that we had.
And if I can just add, we're going to bring all these ideas and concepts to the full village board. We just wanted to brief the finance committee, find out what additional information trustees may want so that we can flush that out before presenting the final concepts to the board.
So on this chart, this is one that I think folks are going to be familiar with because we look at this normally on a monthly basis, and we're just looking at the general fund and the revenues. So as the year goes on, we put a budget into place. It's our best estimate. As the months are occurring and as facts are coming in, we make adjustments to what we think is going to happen with year end. There's going to be some ups and downs, but I'm going to tell you the one that really is impacting right now. So sales tax and the potential impact is not impacting the village at this point in time. So the discussions that we have are things that we're seeing in the future. So you don't see an adjustment made for sales tax right now because there isn't a need for one because we're not having a reduction in sales tax currently.
Well, and the GOB sale, the going out of business sale, should pull forward from some sales as well. So you may actually see an increase this year, but
that's one of the things we just talked
yeah,
about at the
okay.
finance. So I'm making no adjustments to our assumptions right now in terms of what could occur with sales tax revenue. But what is the largest driver that is occurring, and this is a common story that we've had for the past several years, is permits. Permit activity, again, is performing better than budget, and we've had some additional what we call non-recurring items happening as well. So really, I see that our revenue is actually going to be up about $200,000 from where we budgeted, and the bulk of it is really from permits. So what I have here is giving you some background, again, as to why there hasn't been an adjustment made in sales tax. I usually have in the monthly report for the largest revenue items, I show you sort of a pictorial in terms of what's going on. It's the green line shows you the actual. So again, as you can see, there's a lot of variance up and down. So what we do is we apply a 12-month rolling average so you could get some idea in terms of what the trend is. That's the black line. And then what I'm adding new this year is going to be this goldenrod line, and that's to give you what I think on a monthly basis the budgeted amount should be. And really what you're going to see right now is that there really isn't a large differential between what's happening with the actual, and the little laser light has gone out, between the actual and what our budget estimate is. That's why we haven't made an adjustment for sales tax going forward right now.
But if I read this correctly, our April and May underperformed last year.
Right, but even if you look past at prior years, you're going to see that April and May were normally down months.
Right, but if you look at the April, May of 17, it looked like it's maybe 215 and 210, and April, May 18, and I mean, not enough to change a projection, certainly, but something that catches your eye that April and May were down relative to last year. Not a lot, but
Correct,
definitely down.
enough that it's starting to cause that little bit of gap that we're seeing. But for the most part, it has been fairly consistent to what we expected was going to be on a budgetary level, and it is one that we're going to continue to watch going forward. So this gives you an idea on sales tax, but I also then, as sort of a way to kind of measure what's happening and how these charts can help us think about the revenue sources, permits. So you can see, again, in the green is the actual in terms of what's occurring. The black line is telling you that's our smoothed actual number, and then we have our budgetary number. We have talked about this before in the past in terms of how we build this budget, and we have been somewhat conservative in what we've done, but we do have an estimate in terms of the number of homes that we expect and the number of new homes. We have just exceeded that in the past couple of years, which is why we see this gap differential, and it's why you see that our assumption for the rest of the year has been changed going forward. In terms of our general fund expense, again, as the year is occurring, we make some adjustments here and there. We, in total, you're going to see that our projection for the year is down about $1.4 million. What makes that up is going to be on this next slide. And it's comprised of about $100,000 of savings, and that's in wages, and that's because we've had some vacancies and some turnover, mainly in police and fire, a couple of positions in each of those. Overtime is up. If you'll recall, there was a memo that came out from Public Works earlier this year to talk about the effects of the January and February snowstorms and the cold weather that we had, and all the additional overtime work to repair water mains and such. In terms of commodities, salt, we're expecting is going to be about $44,000 more than what we had projected in the budget. Contingency, I'm reducing the appropriation authority down $200,000 from the budget because there's not the additional offset. Remember, in contingency, we started the year with about $300,000 budgeted, and that's to allow us for when additional revenue sources come in, or if there's an additional item that has to happen and we need the appropriation authority to spend it, it is there. So an example would be we received about a $4,600 grant from the Rotary Club to fix the water fountain. So we recognize the revenue and we have the appropriation authority in the contingency account, and that's sort of how we handle that. There's also right now some planned expenses tied to 1225 Central. So those items right now are being utilized in contingency, but the rest of it, I'm right now seeing that as savings to the general fund budget. In engineering and capital, we received favorable road program bids to the tune of about $335,000. So that's money that we're not going to need to spend this year, but those funds then will drop into fund balance and they will be used next year for the road program. And then in the capital bonds, this is really a timing issue. We actually spent more on our capital bond programs than what we had anticipated when we were building the budget. So we're not spending more in terms of the projects, it's just what year they're actually occurring in. So more occurred in 2017, less is happening in 2018. So bottom line, what does this mean for our fund balance? Right now, we are projecting that we are going to end 2017 with roughly $11.5 million in our total fund balance. In 2018, just because of the numbers that we just walked through right now, we're going to utilize about $200,000 of that, so that's why we have the differential, and we go down to about 11.2. Are there any questions about the general fund? With the water and the sewer fund, there's going to be a common story really between both these funds. And the common story is both of them are impacted and driven by what is happening in the weather, and we see that through the revenues. And then there is a major capital item that was split between the two funds that actually we got better pricing on than what we expected, that really is, again, swinging the expenses in both funds. So to start with, water consumption right now, I don't think it's going to surprise, at least through the current year thus far, it's down. I have not projected for the very wet spring that we've had, but I expect, and I'm giving you a heads up, that when we come back and we talk about these numbers later on, I expect that our water sales are going to decline as well. So the only thing we can do is hope for a very dry summer and a dry fall. But if I look at the expense side, in the capital items, we had planned for a large purchase. This is for a catch basin cleaner. And the cost of that was split because it's used in both the water and the sewer fund, so it was split between both the funds. We got a favorable pricing on it, as well as a really good trade-in on our old catch basin cleaner. So in both funds, we're saving about $60,000 between the two of them. So as we look at the water fund and we look in terms of what's happening with its reserve, I'm estimating that we're ending the year in 2017 with about a little over $3.4 million in the fund, and we're going to be utilizing about $200,000 in 2018, which is bringing us down to about 3.2. So the sewer fund, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. The revenue was brought down by the same percentage that we saw in the water fund, and again, it's because it's driven by water fund consumption, so that's down a little over 1%. And the other major story, well, this one actually has another piece to it. In the capital category that you see there, again, you're going to see roughly about a $60,000 reduction for that catch basin cleaner that I just spoke about. The other adjustment that we made here is in the capital debt that was brought down. And really, it's because, again, there was a timing in the spending of bonds. The remaining bonds that we had from our sewer improvement funds, we exhausted all that expenditure in 2017. So it was just, it happened sooner than what we had expected, which is why I'm bringing the number down in terms of the capital debt to match what is supposed to be tied to the IEPA spending, and that's the sewer lining work that we do. We're hoping to get 2 years' worth of that program done in 2018. So the sewer fund balance, this is one that, I should say, again, we had planned to spend the fund balance down over time. When we put the initial increase that we did with the sewer rate back in 2014 and 15, we were building up the fund balance to allow us to meet the debt service payments that we were going to have in relationship to that program. So we know that we're anticipating that fund balance is going to decline over time. The only thing that's really going to change that is if for some reason we have an increase in our revenues, and that's going to be driven by water consumption. So when we have what we'll call positive revenue years, that will positively impact our fund balance. So what are some of the next steps that we're going to have? So the CIP is being worked on right now. That's the capital improvement plan. So the manager's office is working with the departments, accepting all of the ideas. That review process is starting right now. The finance committee, it met today. It's going to be meeting a couple times next month. We're going to be looking at our public safety pensions and how we fund them. The village board is going to meet as a committee of the whole sometime in the late summer to look at the capital improvement program ideas and the suggestions that are in place, as well as some of the ideas, and get a better sort of sense as to where we're at with our revenues in 2018 and what that means for us planning for our 2019 budget, with our goal to bring a budget to the board in October.
And staff sent out a email asking for dates. I think I haven't filled it out yet, but if you haven't.
I would encourage all the trustees to take a look at the doodle and fill that out when you have a
Right,
chance.
so we can try and get a date on the calendar as soon as possible. Okay. Obviously, this is just an update, and there's much more to come, but are there any questions right now for Ms. Malloy?
No, not questions. I think I just want to go back to the general fund, and as Ms. Malloy had, we had a good discussion or start of discussion prior to this meeting as a finance committee, and as you pointed out, President Belinsky, we're not going to see the impact of maybe the sales tax concern, but now's the right time for us to start talking about it. It's going to be here 2 years from now. We've got an issue, and we've got to address it and figure that out. So,
Well, yeah,
compliment to the staff for at least elevating this,
Right.
and getting this out.
No, and the landscape's changing. There's no question about it. We've got other businesses that are at risk, and we need to start thinking about how we react to that. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Malloy.
Great. Thank you.
That was our only item.
Okay, so I'll move on to the Administration Committee. There were 4 items that were covered on the consent agenda. Municipal Services, Trustee Wolf.
No report.
Public Safety, Trustee Kurzman.
All items covered on consent.
And Judiciary Committee, Trustee Plunkett.
All items covered on consent.
So there are no reports from our special committees. Item 7 is new business. There's no additional new business to discuss. Item 8, pending matters referred to standing committees. No actions to take there. So we'll move on to item 9. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We stand adjourned at 7:54.